welcome you watching Gravitas with me, Molly Gambit. Here's a look at what's lined up for you on the show tonight. For the last 12 months, as the Russia-Ukraine war continued to dominate global headlines, the one question that has been asked is, when will the war end? Tonight, we tell you all about a peace proposal by China and why it has the West all worked up. We ask if China's peace plan is actually succeeding. Where does that leave the West? Why does Volodymyr Zelensky want to meet Xi Jinping? What is China's peace proposal all about? Also on the show for you tonight, the US Energy Department says the Wuhan virus pandemic was most likely the result of a lab leak. We get you a Gravitas special report. Pakistan's economic crisis is intensifying. The country is now dealing with a new headache as basic medicines like Dispirin are running out. Are Iran school girls being poisoned to stop them from going to school? Who is behind this? We tell you what the Deputy Health Minister has said and why his statement has sent shockwaves around the world. The US petrochemicals giant Dow promised to recycle shoes, but instead these shoes were found in a market. We decode this murky recycling row. Is China's sudden peace gambit on Ukraine getting traction? I am asking this question not because Beijing's 12-point peace plan seems to have become an acceptable starting point for Vladimir Putin. China and Russia are virtual allies, so we can expect that. And neither am I asking this because Russia's faithful, the Belarusian President Lukashenko, has scheduled a sudden trip to Beijing. That is staged movement in the Russian camp. I ask this because, to everyone's surprise and perhaps Washington's shock, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has reacted positively by his standards. His first reaction to other proposals has been hardline, with a precondition that Russia must vacate territory first before he will talk. Not this time, though. This time, the Ukrainian president says he is open to China's proposals and is willing to work with Beijing. Before I deconstruct his response for you, let me just say this. This is a twist no one expected, especially not the NATO. You see, for weeks now, NATO and the West have been trying to paint China as a non-party, a country without the heft or credibility to lead negotiations in this conflict, a state which, given its human rights record, has no right to broker peace. As it turns out, Volodymyr Zelensky does not quite see it that way. Indeed, he stunned his American and European allies who have been providing everything he asked for in terms of money and arms by saying that he was ready to meet China's Xi Jinping. So how exactly do we view this turn of events? Has China opened a new chapter in this war? Has China divided Ukraine's allies and divided Ukraine from its allies? Are there other countries on board China's plan? These questions are complex, and we will try to keep the answers simple. Let me start with China's proposal. It was released over the weekend, right after Wang Yi's visit to Moscow. And what is in this proposal? A 12-point peace plan. This is what it states. 1. Respecting the sovereignty of all countries. 2. Abandoning the Cold War mentality. And number 3, ceasing hostilities. Number 4, resuming the peace talks. And number 5, resolving the humanitarian crisis. Number 6, protecting civilians and prisoners of war. Number 7, keeping nuclear power plants safe. And number 8, reducing strategic risks. Number 9, facilitating grain exports. Number 10, stopping unilateral sanctions. Number 11, keeping industrial and supply chains stable. And number 12, promoting post-conflict reconstruction. These are China's 12 proposals. On its website, the country's foreign ministry has explained the idea behind each of them, with examples of how they can be implemented. But nowhere does Beijing's peace proposal state that Russia must withdraw its troops from Ukraine. Yet, this plan has impressed Volodymyr Zelensky. Speaking at a press conference on Friday, he said he was open to considering some aspects of this proposal and would like to meet Xi Jinping in the days ahead to discuss them. Let me just quote the most telling excerpts from his statement. China has shown its thoughts. I believe the fact that China started talking about Ukraine is not bad, but the question is, what follows the words? The question is in the steps and where they will lead to. I really want to believe that China will not supply weapons to the Russian Federation. I believe that China will be on the side of the just world, which means on our side. I am planning to meet with Xi Jinping. This will be important for world security. And I want to stress on one line that stayed with me. I believe that China will be on the side of the just world. Now, we understand Ukraine is in a desperate position right now. But to expect China to be a leader of a just world must be wishful thinking. China's own record of aggression against neighbors and indeed against its own people, like the Uyghurs, is a matter of proven record. But what China can do, and seems to have done, is finessed America and Europe. In Beijing's view, China has placed itself at the helm of the solution, while the West has promoted the problem. This line could find support. It goes without saying that Beijing has its own ulterior motives behind this plan, motives that Zelensky may have not sensed or is willing to live with. Let me just go back to the proposal for now. Point number 12, promoting post-conflict reconstruction. It states that China is ready to provide post-war assistance and play a constructive role in helping Ukraine rebuild. That is nothing but the first step in a ploy to enable Chinese companies pick up massive reconstruction contracts. Is China looking to make money out of Ukraine's misery? Yes. But in fairness, it will not be the only country eager to do so. In any case, this is a question that Zelensky must ponder over. Zelensky also said he believes that China will be on Ukraine's side. Isn't this belief a bit misplaced, just to put this mildly? Has Beijing funded Ukraine over the last year, or Washington and Brussels? Does he really expect NATO to walk away from Ukraine now that China has stepped in? Does Zelensky fully understand one thing, that China might be acting as a proxy for Russia? Does he really expect China, which has not condemned Russia's actions in the last 1 year, to side with Kiev? And if he does, then in the words of his current allies, he is only deluding himself. I am not the one saying this. America and Europe are. In fact, they've both criticized China's initiative. The NATO Secretary General saying China does not have much credibility to launch such an initiative because it has not been able to condemn Russia's illegal actions. Those were the exact words spoken. And the same story with the European Union. The chief of the European Commission saying China has already taken sides in this conflict. Expecting it to broker peace is hard to digest. And that said, China might have already planted clear differences within the European Union. There are some leaders who share Zelensky's belief. Leaders like Emmanuel Macron, the president of France. Not only has he welcomed China's proposal, he also plans to visit Beijing in early April. What for, you ask? To make Xi Jinping sustain pressure on Putin to end this war. At least that is what the French media is saying. Is Macron the only leader on board the plan? So far, yes. And could Germany sing a similar tune shortly, given how the German people are becoming tired of this conflict? Well, it could be. But surprisingly, the German Chancellor is not entirely impressed with China's plan so far. He recently told reporters that some of the proposals made sense, but the fact that Beijing refused to condemn the Russian invasion is disappointing and makes the proposal unacceptable. This is just an initial reaction. There is no saying if he will stick to this stance in the days ahead. And lastly, what about countries beyond Europe? Are they in favor of China's proposals? We don't know yet. But interestingly, the Saudi foreign minister visited Ukraine on Sunday. Prince Faisal bin Farhad. He met Zelensky at the presidential residence in Kiev and discussed ways to peacefully resolve this conflict. This was the first visit by a Saudi foreign minister to Ukraine since 1993. And naturally, it has raised suspicions that Riyadh is also pushing for an end to this conflict and perhaps pushing the China plan, because Riyadh and Beijing have grown close of late. Listen to this.
The kingdom is also really eager to support everything that reduces tension and escalation in order to get to a peaceful solution to this war, and we in Saudi Arabia are convinced that any end of the war should be through discussions on a negotiation table in a framework of international law and through the Charter of the United Nations to respect the sovereignty of the countries. This is why we will keep working with different parts to search for chance of getting to such a settlement.
So you have China, you have France, and now you have Riyadh. All three are pushing for an end to this conflict. Is this an indication that the China plan has become the de facto way forward? Should we see this as the beginning of a new cycle of negotiations? Has China's proposal set the ball rolling for credible peace talks? As usual, time will tell. And staying on with China, our next story is about the Wuhan virus. The virus brought the whole world to a standstill. We are still dealing with its after effects. But have you wondered how all of it began? Of course you have. Over the last 3 years, a number of theories have emerged about the origin of the Wuhan virus. Some say it spread through natural transmission, that is, from an infected bat to human beings. Some believe it was released as a bioweapon. There was even some misinformation that the 5G network was spreading the Wuhan virus. So what is the truth? America seems to have an answer for you. It says the Wuhan virus most likely arose from a laboratory leak. The U.S. Energy Department was initially undecided on the matter, but after further investigation, it now shares the FBI stance that the pandemic was caused by a mishap at a Chinese lab. The Energy Department's conclusion is significant as it has considerable scientific expertise. It oversees a network of US national laboratories, some of which conduct advanced biological research, and its stand cannot be taken lightly. That resonates with the FBI as well. It employs a cadre of microbiologists and other scientists who came to the same conclusion in 2021. The agency still holds that view. While both departments have come to the same result, they had different reasons, and these reasons are yet to be known. The White House has not published an unclassified report, but it counters the reports of 4 other US intelligence agencies. These agencies say the epidemic was a result of natural transmission. 2 others still remain undecided. You see, the country is still putting together the puzzle pieces. Lawmakers, particularly the House and the Senate Republicans, are pursuing their own investigations. They are pressing the Biden administration for more information. The Republican lawmakers have been at the spearhead. They have questioned the virus-modifying research conducted in Wuhan. And why not? America, after all, did fund research at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. US-based EcoHealth Alliance was awarded a grant in the year 2014. It was meant to look into possible coronaviruses from bats. The organization received $3.7 million from the National Institutes of Health. It gave $600,000 to the Wuhan Institute of Virology. The project was renewed for another 5 years in 2019. Do note that this was before the outbreak of the virus. It was then pulled by the Trump administration in April 2020 following the global pandemic. Does it make any sense? Should federal grants have been used to support virus studies in China? The research always posed a threat. And why is that? Because it was reportedly meant to understand the risk of viruses, a process known as gain of function. And while that sounds reasonable, you might want to rethink that. Let me just break it down for you. Gain of function is when an organism develops new abilities. This can happen in nature or it can be achieved in a lab. It makes some viruses more infectious and more deadly. Now, how do scientists justify the potential risks? They say the research can help prepare for future outbreaks. It helps understand how the viruses evolve and develop better treatments and vaccines. But then again, is that really justified? What if a leak happens, as the US Energy Department and the FBI are now suspecting? In fact, 3 researchers from the Wuhan Institute of Virology were sick enough to seek hospital care. Yet, China was reportedly conducting the research, and the US was allegedly funding it. American infectious diseases expert Dr. Anthony Fauci firmly rejected the claim, but Republicans have their doubts. They questioned if the federal government was too quick to dismiss the theory. As the lawmakers cried foul among themselves, tensions heightened between the US and China. It said Beijing was withholding information regarding the outbreak. You see, China has tried to intimidate other countries when it comes to questioning whether the virus emerged naturally. The virus first circulated in Wuhan in November 2019. At first, the dominant view was that the virus arose naturally, that it leapt from an animal to a human being. This is what has happened in the past. But as time passed, doubts sparked. Have a look at this report by the WHO. It says no specific infected host was found in China. So where does that leave us? The WHO plans to investigate the matter further, but it needs China's support for that. And achieving that is no easy feat. China has placed limits on investigations. It suggests the virus emerged outside the country. You see, Beijing has always tried to cover up its deeds. It has hurled accusations at others and underreported COVID-19 deaths. Now, the possibility of a lab leak is gaining traction. Debate over the origin of the Wuhan virus is getting vigorous. But a lot still remains unclear. Let's now turn our attention to the United Kingdom. The UK and the European Union have agreed on a new Northern Ireland Protocol. It is a post-Brexit protocol. It governs the trade rules between Northern Ireland and Ireland. The previous protocol was negotiated by Boris Johnson, but it was controversial. It was violently opposed in Northern Ireland. And the new Northern Ireland Protocol was negotiated in London today. The European Commission President, Ursula von der Leyen, met the British Prime Minister. The previous protocol kicked off in 2020 and enacted as part of UK's Brexit arrangement. Sunak says Johnson's protocol affected the Good Friday peace deal. Let's just take a look at what Johnson's Northern Ireland Protocol mandated. Its most controversial clause was a customs border in the Irish Sea between Northern Ireland and the rest of the UK. Even though Northern Ireland is part of the United Kingdom, in fact, it irked Unionists in Northern Ireland so much that lawmakers of Democratic Unionist Party resigned in protest. They have boycotted the Northern Ireland Assembly over it. It has remained suspended since last February. Riots broke out in Northern Ireland's capital last April, clashes between Unionists and Irish Republicans. According to Unionists, the protocol undermined the Good Friday Agreement. They have called for scrapping the protocol altogether. And before I go any further, it's worthwhile to discuss the Good Friday Agreement. The historic multi-party pact was signed in 1998. It was backed by two federal governments, the United Kingdom and the Republic of Ireland. It ended nearly 3 decades of violence in Northern Ireland. Over 3,500 people were left dead in the political clashes. The era has rightly been called as the Troubles. A soft border was a major draw of the Good Friday Agreement, a soft border between Northern Ireland and Ireland. And this would ensure free movement of goods, services and people. But the UK's decision to exit the European Union complicated the soft border concept. Ireland still remains part of the European Union. In fact, the ex-Prime Minister Boris Johnson had vowed to keep the soft border in place. He later backtracked and agreed to create a customs border in the Irish Sea. But after assuming power last year, Sunak vowed to set this right. Irrespective of their ideological moorings, politicians across the British spectrum know the significance of the Northern Ireland deal. They understand its importance for maintaining peace in Northern Ireland, lest the region falls back into deadly spirals of ethno-nationalist tensions. Let's just listen in to what the Labour Party leader, Keir Starmer, had said.
Frankly, any step in those directions is going to be an improvement on what we've got, which is why I say with confidence we expect to be able to back the deal if there is one this afternoon or whenever we may see it. It's not going to be a surprise. It's not going to be out of the blue. We've been working on these problems for a very, very long time and know what some of the solutions are. Look, it is almost inevitable that the ECJ will have to play some part in this. I think the Prime Minister recognises that, the government recognises that, but we've got to make progress. I think, we owe it to the people of Northern Ireland to get on and fix this.
However, some big questions remain. Questions like if the new protocol would be backed by the Unionists, by the hardliners in the Brexit camp, by hardliners in Sunak's own party. Another question concerns the fate of Boris Johnson. His deal has been ripped apart. Is this the end of Johnson's political future, or will he spring up some surprise on the British Prime Minister? Our next story comes from Iran. A statement by an Iranian deputy minister has sent shockwaves around the world. According to him, school girls in the country are being poisoned. I'm going to give you a few seconds just to process that. School girls, he says, are being poisoned. But why? Why would someone poison school girls? Who is behind this? Where exactly is this happening in the country? and what is being done about it? Let me just break down what we know so far. First things first, who has made the statement? The Deputy Health Minister, Younes Panahi. He says some people were poisoning schoolgirls in the holy city of Qom. The city lies south of Tehran. This is where it is located in the country. He says the schoolgirls are being poisoned to stop them from going to school, to shut down education for girls. Now, the thing is, cases of respiratory poisoning have been reported among schoolgirls in Qom since late November. There have been hundreds of such cases. In fact, some needed hospital treatment. And now the Deputy Health Minister has implicitly confirmed that these poisonings have been deliberate. Let me quote from what the IRNA state news agency has said. It quotes the Deputy Minister as saying, after the poisoning of several students in Qom schools, it was found that some people wanted all schools, especially girls' schools, to be closed. So have there been any arrests linked to the poisonings? Not yet. Let me tell you something else now. This is not the first time the issue is coming to light. In fact, earlier this month, on the 14th of February to be precise, parents of students who had been unwell gathered outside the governorate. They wanted an explanation from the authorities. And after this, the government spokesman, Ali Bahodari, had said that the intelligence and the education ministries were trying to figure out the cause of the poisonings. In fact, last week, the Prosecutor General, Mohammad Jafar, ordered a judicial probe into the incidents. Just have a look at the timing of these poisonings. When the anti-hijab protests have continued to grip the country, the protests that started in September last year have become one of the biggest challenges to Iran's theocracy since the 1979 Islamic Revolution. The trigger for the protests was the death of 22-year-old Mahsa Amini after she was arrested by the morality police. The anti-hijab protest transformed into a months-long movement. It is a movement that refuses to die down. In fact, earlier this month, protesters marched through the streets of multiple cities overnight. These protests were a sign that the anger on the ground continues to boil over. Since the protest started, at least 529 people have been killed in demonstrations. This is according to the human rights activists in the country. Over 19,700 have been detained. There has been a violent crackdown to clamp down on the dissent. We have been telling you how the country's youngest have been taking on the country's mightiest. Schoolgirls have been taking to the streets. The women of the country have made it clear that the era of forced hijab is over. But this movement has become about a lot more than the hijab. It has become a movement seeking change. Let's now tell you what's happening in Pakistan. It is in the grip of yet another crisis, a crisis that has left hospitals in disarray and embarrassed the Shehbaz Sharif government. I use that word with caution, embarrassed, because Pakistan has run out of basic medicines that are easily available at drugstores in most countries. Let me now take you through their names: Panadol, insulin, Brufen, Disprin, Calpol, Tegral, Nimesulide, Hepamers, Buscopan, and Rivotril. All these medicines are running low on supplies in Pakistan. Why is that? Because of a lack of forex reserves. Last we checked, they had slipped to an abysmal $3.2 billion. $3.2 billion. This has crippled Pakistan's capacity for crucial items to be brought in. So far, this crisis was restricted to food, fuel and luxury imports, and now it has hit the medicine sector. Reports say Pakistan does not have enough money to buy essential medicines or the active pharmaceutical ingredients known as API. What is API? API is simply a substance used in drugs that's responsible for the beneficial health effects in consumers. An example could be the acetaminophen contained in a pain relief tablet. Right now, Pakistan cannot buy any of these, neither the medicines nor the active ingredients. The drug makers claim that commercial banks are not issuing new lines of credit for their imports. And the result is this: pharmaceutical manufacturers have been forced to slash their production. And this has left many patients battling for their lives in the hospitals. This is what things have gotten down to. Here's what reports in the Pakistani media are stating. Doctors are stalling surgeries due to shortage of drugs. 2. Operation theatres are left with less than 2 weeks of supplies. Number 3. Critical drugs required for sensitive surgeries are out of stock. And number 4, people working at hospitals are also at risk of losing their jobs due to these shortages. In a nutshell, this crisis is serious. But the question is why? The answer is complex. You see, medicine manufacturing in Pakistan is highly import dependent. Nearly 95% of the drugs requiring raw materials come from other countries like India and China. But for the last 2 months, these imports have been held at the Karachi port due to a shortage of dollars in the banking system. But if the imports are stuck, why can't they make these drugs at home? Because they can't. A, because they don't have the required expertise. B, because making drugs at home is costly, especially now due to rising fuel costs and transportation charges, along with the sharp devaluation of the Pakistani rupee. These factors make producing medicines domestically a no-brainer. And so the crisis is escalating, and drug makers are upset. Reports say the Pakistan Medical Association, or PMA, has requested the intervention of the government to prevent the situation from turning into a disaster. However, instead of taking immediate steps, the authorities are still trying to assess the quantum of the shortage. It's truly a sad state of affairs. The healthcare system is on the brink of collapse, and the government is busy assessing the scale of the shortages. It's true what they say, common sense is a commodity that is always low on supply in Pakistan. Let's now turn our attention to Nepal. The Himalayan nation is in the throes of political turbulence. KP Sharma Oli has decided to quit the ruling alliance. He is a former prime minister, a political heavyweight. He has the reputation of being pro-China. The party he leads was part of a 7-party alliance led by the Prime Minister Pushpa Kumar Dahal, or Prachanda. It was formed in December after elections. Prachanda and Oli don't get along well. Yet they joined hands for the sake of power. The differences came to the fore once again last week. Our next report telling you more.
There is a full-blown political war underway in Nepal. It started last week, after the Prime Minister Pushpa Kumar Dahal, or Prachanda, backed a candidate from the Nepali Congress for the post of Nepal's next president. Nepali Congress is the largest party in the parliament, yet it was denied power after the November election. The fallout of Prachanda's decision was immediate. Last week, a junior coalition partner of Prachanda withdrew its support. It is called the Rashtriya Prajatantra Party. But the withdrawal of KP Sharma Oli's party is even more significant. Under the power-sharing deal after last year's elections, Oli would have come back to power in 2025, but that won't happen now. It is likely that the Prachanda government would survive, as it is now backed by Nepali Congress. But make no mistake about it, These political developments carry possible implications for Kathmandu's foreign relations with its two big neighbors, India and China. And why is that? First, let's take a look at the ties between China and Nepal. Oli served as Nepal's PM twice between 2015 and 2021. Under Oli, Nepal's ties with China blossomed. Oli signed Nepal on to the Belt and Road Initiative, or the BRI. Consequently, China became the largest source of foreign investment in Nepal in 2019. Previously, the honor was held by India. Under Oli, the Communist parties of China and Nepal came closer. They signed an inter-party pact. So, is Oli's departure from Nepalese leadership a setback for China? China will probably never admit it, but it has previously made efforts to bring Oli and Prachanda together. In fact, the previous Chinese ambassador to Nepal was directly mediating between Oli and Prachanda. The Chinese mediation didn't work. But China hasn't stopped trying. Amid the ongoing drama, the new Chinese ambassador also held a series of meetings. His name is Chen Song. He met Prachanda and Oli separately last week. Now, let's shift our focus to the relationship between Nepal and India. And how the ties have fared in recent years. Traditionally, India has been Nepal's biggest backer. Ties between the two nations are underpinned by a treaty. It's called the 1950 Treaty of Peace and Friendship. But under the Oli government, Nepal grew increasingly critical of New Delhi. In 2020, the Nepalese parliament passed a new country map. The map showed some Indian territories as part of Nepal. New Delhi accused Kathmandu of artificial enlargement. Last month, he accused India of interfering in Nepalese politics. India has rejected Oli's claims. Nepal's politics has a reputation of being highly unpredictable. No Nepalese prime minister has served a full 5-year term since 1990. It remains to be seen which way the current political crisis in Nepal heads.
Our next story is about man's best friend. I'm talking about books and movies. If written well, they leave a lasting impact on us. I hope you would agree with me on that. And even if you are not an avid reader, there might be at least one book that you read which stayed with you, which shaped the way you perceive certain things, influenced your beliefs. A Roald Dahl book, perhaps, or an Agatha Christie classic. When something holds that much of an impact, it's bound to come under scrutiny. Roald Dahl's books have hit headlines in recent days. His publisher, Puffin Books, has released edited versions of some of his bestsellers. Why is that? To make them less offensive and more appropriate for modern readers. They have been censored for sensitivity. Some passages relating to weight, mental health, gender, race have been altered. Hundreds of changes have been made to the original text. Some passages not written by Dahl have also been added. Let's just have a look at some of the edits. Have you read Charlie and the Chocolate Factory? Then you might know Augustus Gloop, Charlie's antagonist in that book. Well, he is no longer enormously fat, just enormous. Gender-neutral terms have been added. Factory's Oompa Loompas were small men, they are now small people. In the fabulous Mr. Fox, the word black has been removed from the terrible tractor's description. The machines are now just murderous, brutal-looking monsters. Feminism has also found its way into the alterations. In the new edition of Witches, a supernatural female may be working as a top scientist or running a business. She is no longer just a cashier in a supermarket or typing letters for a businessman. Now, these edits were made in good faith. Campaigners sought to protect youngsters from cultural, ethnic, and gender stereotypes in literature and other media. You see, their argument was always portraying an African American or an obese person as the villain could leave some lasting impressions on young minds. Always showing women in weak or subordinate characters could count as sexism. But the edits were not received in that light. They were meant to suit the sensibilities of this century. But instead, they stirred widespread backlash and debates. Critics complain revisions risk undermining the genius of great artists. They prevent the readers from confronting the world as it is. Booker Prize-winning author Salman Rushdie came to Dahl's rescue, and this is what he tweeted. Roald Dahl was no angel, but this is absurd censorship. PEN America said it was alarmed by the changes. It is a community of writers that advocates freedom of expression. Even Queen Consort Camilla criticized the curbs on expression. You see, the edits were meant to resonate with modern readers, but critics say they kill the essence of the book, that books should be available in original forms. As the alterations distort the original work, the older versions would help children develop critical thinking. It would let them react to the books instead of portraying things in a certain light. And following the criticism, Puffin Books and its parent, Penguin Random House, have decided to republish the books. In these versions, the original text will be provided alongside the edited versions. But Dahl's books were only one such example. Multiple such revisions have been made to several books over time. The James Bond novels have also been edited to remove racial references. All of Ian Fleming's Bond novels will be re-released in April to mark 70 years of the series. Harper Lee's To Kill a Mockingbird has also had a long history when it comes to censorship. Mark Twain's The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn met a similar fate. What does all of this mean? Are we too woke to be converted by literature? Or are we moving in the right direction? What do you think? Write to us and let us know. Let me now ask you a question. What do you do with your old shoes? Some people give them away, while some discard them. But have you ever wondered what happens to the discarded pairs? Let me tell you, the shoe waste ends up in landfills. And since they are made of synthetic materials, it takes them years to decompose naturally. Hence, shoe trash takes a huge toll on the environment. So recycling them might seem like a good idea, but as we all know, we don't live in an ideal world. Our next report is about a company which promised to recycle old shoes into running tracks and playgrounds. But in reality, the shoes ended up in the markets of Indonesia. Take a look.
Others see an old shoe, we see the future. This was the slogan of a shoe recycling program launched in 2021. US petrochemical firm Dow and the Singapore government steered the scheme. The program promised to recycle the material of these shoes into building material for new playgrounds, jogging tracks, and much more. With the novel promise, the program placed dozens of wheelie bins for shoe donations across Singapore. The program found a good response, with people depositing thousands of used sneakers, flip-flops, and school shoes. But Dow had a history of falling short on its recycling goals. Hence, Reuters put the shoe recycling program to the test. In July 2022, Reuters correspondent Joe Brock followed a donated shoe on its journey with the help of a Bluetooth location tracker.
And I'm just going to call this shoe 1. Pick a little shoe emoji so we can see it on the phone. And now once we put that in the shoe, we drop it off, we'll be able to see wherever it goes in the world.
He found that the pair found its way to a crumbling second-hand shoe store in the nearby Indonesian island of Batam. In September, he put trackers in 10 pairs of donated shoes. Reuters tracked the pairs of shoes over a 6-month period. But again, none of the pairs ended up in exercise paths as promised. Instead, all of them were tracked to a warehouse of a second-hand goods exporter, Yok Impex. From there, the shoes walked outside Singapore's territory. One of them was found at a frenzied mall in Jakarta. The sneakers were freshly cleaned and fitted with a new pair of laces. They were now on sale again for $20.
Thank you. Okay. I've just bought these shoes from a shop here in this market in Jakarta for 300,000 rupiahs, which is about $20 US. Now let's go somewhere quieter and make sure this is the same pair that we dropped off in Singapore.
And this is not the first recycling scheme by Dow that hasn't lived up to its promise. In 2021, a Reuters investigation found irregularities in a Dow's program in Idaho. The company promised to use breakthrough technology to turn plastic waste into clean fuel. But Reuters found that it was actually burning plastic trash to fuel a cement plant. Environmental groups say chemical companies like Dow make exaggerated or false claims about recycling. This helps them to burnish their green credentials. The donated shoes that ended up in Indonesia brought to light another problem, that of illegal second-hand clothing. Indonesian officials say flooding of local markets by these goods undercuts the country's local textile industry. It also adds more waste into its already bulging landfills.
Let's now tell you what else made news around the world. Time for Gravitas Global Headlines.
Football fans in Istanbul call for resignation of the Turkish government as outrage against the Erdogan administration continues to grow in the aftermath of a deadly earthquake. China has called the move by United States to sanction Chinese companies over certain Russia exports as illegal. Chinese Foreign Ministry says it will take resolute countermeasures in response to U.S. sanctions against Chinese companies and has lodged stern representations with the U.S. The Russian military has said that its forces struck an electric intelligence center near Brovary, just east of Kyiv. Russia's defense ministry also said that Russian forces struck a special operations center of the Ukrainian armed forces near the western city of Khmelnytsky. It has claimed that a Ukrainian self-propelled anti-aircraft missile system, or the Buk M1, was destroyed near the Andrivka settlement. Several hundred Ukrainians gathered in Rome to protest against the Russian invasion. Many protesters were seen wearing and waving Ukrainian flags, while some performed theater, enacting many harrowing scenes caused by the Russian bombing. Pakistan Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif says over 24 Pakistanis are believed to be among 59 who drowned when a boat carrying migrants to Europe crashed against the rocks near the southern Italian coast. Tens of thousands of people filled Mexico City's vast main plaza to protest President Obrador's electoral law changes they say threaten democracy and could mark a return to the past. Many protesters who couldn't fit in the square spilled on to nearby streets. The marchers were clad mostly in white and pink, the color of the National Electoral Institute, and shouted slogans like "Don't touch my vote." Severe storms moved through Midwestern states in the U.S. with the tornado warning issued for parts of Texas, Oklahoma, and Kansas. One such storm produced strong gusts and bursts of lightning over the town of Sublette, Kansas. Wind gusts measuring up to 70 miles per hour have been recorded in western Kansas, with local media reporting power outages due to fallen power lines. 4 people who were charged in connection with the killing of 28-year-old model Abby Choi appeared in court this morning after Hong Kong police found parts of her body. Police investigators confirmed a head and ribs were found inside one of 2 large pots inside a 3-story house in Hong Kong's rural Tai Po district, where Choi is believed to have been butchered. Novak Djokovic continues to rewrite the history books in tennis. The 22-time Grand Slam champion has kicked off his 378th week as world number 1, and that takes him past Steffi Graf's record for most weeks as world number 1. Charles Howell III earned his first professional victory in more than 4 years by winning Live Golf's Mayakoba Invitational in Mexico by a 4-stroke margin. The 42-year-old also spearheaded an emphatic victory for his team Crushers GC at the season opener and went home richer by $4.65 million.
On that note, it's a wrap on this edition of Gravitas Tonight. We are leaving you with Gravitas images. Thanks very much for watching.